Hey guys, alright? Welcome everyone. No matter how many times scientists warned humanity about climate change, no one listened. And by 2019 a series of hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, and droughts caused destruction across the planet. After losing several cities, world leaders united, led by the United States, and found a way to neutralize the storms with a network of thousands of satellites, each employing countermeasures designed to impact the basic elements of the weather. This satellite network was known as Dutch Boy and was designed by the chief architect Jake. For now, it was a United States-owned operation, but in 3 years, Dutch Boy would be transferred to an international council. One day, Jake is called to a disciplinary hearing with a United States Senate subcommittee because he punched a federal inspector and put Dutch Boy online without authorization. Jake doesn't accept the reprimand and responds with sarcasm, ignoring the text messages from his brother Max asking him to stop. Jake explains that he punched the officer because he wouldn't stop touching parts of the machine that nearly killed him, and that he activated Dutch Boy to stop a series of storms that would have killed thousands of people. The Senate doesn't care, they just want Jake to be obedient, so they decide to send a new team to the station to keep an eye on things and that Jake will have to fire some of the old team members. After the meeting, Jake bumps into Max, who works with the United States Secretary of State. Max was chosen to be in charge of Dutch Boy, and he decided to fire Jake because he thinks it's best for the project. Jake is devastated to learn that his brother could do this to his own family and stops talking to him. 3 years later, a UN team stationed in Afghanistan receives some strange readings on their scanners and goes to check out a nearby village. To their shock, the whole place is frozen and the people are dead. A recording of this finding is sent to the President of the United States, Palma, and his team, agreeing that it should be kept secret for now. There is evidence that this was caused by Dutch Boy, but politicians don't want to deactivate it because the press will immediately investigate the cause. Max proposes sending someone to check the malfunction and Secretary of State Deckham tells him to hire Jake for the job. No matter how much Max dislikes his brother, Jake is still the one who knows the station best. Meanwhile, at Dutch Boy, the satellite responsible for Afghanistan returns to be checked. Engineer Habib finds some strange data on its hard drive and decides to make a copy that he hides in his locker. Then he tries to get back to work, but when he enters an empty room, suddenly the doors lock around him and the windows break. Habib is expelled into space and dies instantly. The next day, Max visits Jake, who is living in Florida after his divorce and stays with his daughter Hannah 2 weekends a month. Jake doesn't want to see Max and tries to send him away, but Max tells him about Afghanistan and the airlock accident, asking him to rejoin the project. When Jake refuses, Max changes his mind, pointing out that his invention is killing people. Later, in the Hong Kong offices of the Pacific Climate Council, Long accesses the system and notices something strange about the incident in Afghanistan, then tries to call Max to warn him, but only finds the voicemail. Later, he goes to the market to buy some things, noticing how hot it is. In fact, the heat is so intense that a cat is trying to stay inside the market's refrigerator, and when Long accidentally drops his eggs, they fry on the pavement. Suddenly, the ground starts to shake and Long notices fire whirls destroying the streets. He immediately flees in his car, driving between all the panicked people and the constant collapse of buildings. Long doesn't stop until he reaches the road outside the city and the decreasing temperature indicates he is out of range, but when he turns around, he discovers that Hong Kong is now in ruins. When it's time for Jake to leave, Hannah cries because she thinks Jake won't come back and he's always been hard to count on, but Jake promises he'll come back. Moments later, Jake boards a space shuttle and flies to Dutch Boy, feeling at home again in space. He meets Commander Fassbinder, the station's chief scientist, and she introduces him to her main team, which includes Security Officer Dessette and Systems Analyst Duncan. They think the incident in Hong Kong was a gas explosion because that's what the news said, but Jake is sure it was caused by the same thing that froze the village. Meanwhile, on Earth, Max spends time with his girlfriend Sarah, who is part of the President's Secret Service. They are interrupted by a call from Long, who informs Max about the heat he felt before the incident, meaning it wasn't a gas pipe. He tried to check Dutch Boy to confirm his theory, but his account was blocked, and Max finds that his is too. Someone in the government is covering up a flaw in the system, and this has the potential to cause a geostorm, which consists of simultaneous catastrophic climatic events triggered all over the globe. Max promises to investigate, and after hanging up, he finds out that Sarah was called to work because the president decided to do a last-minute press interview, which sounds quite sudden. In the office, Long keeps trying to log in when the power goes out. He hears some voices coming from the hallway and runs to hide, which allows Long to see how US agents take his computer and all his documentation. At Dutch Boy, Jake finds that the records from Afghanistan were erased by the malfunction, so he orders the team to check the records of the other satellites to track any signs of corruption. The next day, Max visits his friend Dana, a cybersecurity expert who works in the government's IT department. He asks her to investigate the account lockout, and Dana confirms that someone programmed it to look like it was part of a glitch, but it was definitely intentional. At Dutch Boy, Jake has a video conference with Max, who informs him that there may be some foul play involved in the incidents. Jake is happy to hear this because he knew Dutch Boy had been well built, and Max authorizes him to retrieve the Hong Kong satellite. This causes a discussion because Jake doesn't think he needs Max's permission to do anything. And Max reminds him that he had to clean up Jake's stupid mistakes all the time after their parents died. He's tired of being responsible for his brother, so if Jake doesn't behave, he will be fired again. The Hong Kong satellite arrives at the station, but suddenly the robotic arm that grabs it goes crazy and starts shaking, damaging part of the hangar before dropping the satellite. The fall completely destroys the satellite, and the team has to recover the few surviving pieces. Unfortunately, the accident created an electrical short circuit and burned all the drives, so Jake thinks they no longer have any evidence of corruption to analyze. However, Dasset informs him that he has been looking at the video of Habib's death and discovered something. The panels that exploded had drives in them, and one of them got stuck in the communication tower. Jake and Fassbinder go out for a spacewalk to retrieve the panel, but suddenly Jake's suit starts to fail and he loses control of his movements. The agitation makes him drop the panel and get hit against the station, so he ejected his jetpack and managed to hold onto a wire to avoid floating away. Moments later, Fassbinder brings him back inside, and Jake reveals that he grabbed the drive from the panel before dropping it. When the team checks, Jake doesn't tell them about the drive because he's sure his suit was sabotaged by one of them. Later, he and Fassbinder investigate the drive and find that there are no signs of corruption, confirming that someone has been causing the so-called accidents on purpose. Jake tries to find the login information behind this programming, but he's blocked. Meanwhile, Long arranges to meet Max and Sarah at a cafe. However, when Long is about to cross the street, he is pushed in front of a car and hit severely. The mysterious man escapes in his own car and Sarah tries to chase him, but isn't quick enough. Max runs to Long's side and hears him say the word Zeus before dying. A few hours later, Max receives a call from Jake and answers because he says it's an emergency. However, Jake just wants to apologize for his behavior and reminds Max that there's an unspoken code between brothers before telling the whole story of the day they went fishing with their dad. Max understands his intentions and rushes to see Dana to show her a recording of Jake's anecdote. Dana doesn't understand how it's an emergency and Max explains that they never went fishing as children, which means Jake is trying to pass a message in code because he thinks he's being spied on. Max gives Dana the code they used as children, and Dana puts together different minutes of the video to create the real message which tells him, evidence of sabotage at the highest level of government, trust no one. Then, Max asks Dana to investigate Project Zeus, and Dana finds a file that's doubly encrypted on a White House security network, which isn't inviolable. She needs the right credentials to break it. Moments later, Sarah comes home and sees signs of a break-in. She draws her gun only to find it's Max and Dana, who don't want anyone to know they're there. Max asks for Sarah's credentials to steal the information, and initially, she refuses because it would be breaking her oath, but changes her mind when Max points out that if he's asking for something so serious it's because it's extremely important. Back at Dutch Boy, Jake and Fassbinder check the security cameras and discover that Habib hid something in his locker. However, when they check, they find the locker empty. Suddenly, Dasset appears pointing his gun at them, and since he doesn't immediately kill them, Jake understands that Dasset also wants to find out who killed Habib. After confirming they're on the same side, Dasset confesses that Habib's things are in a different locker. He explains that he saw the security cameras too and didn't say anything because he thought the culprit would reveal himself by coming to destroy the items. The trio opens the right locker and finds the copy of the drive, which reveals that someone put a virus in the station's system. Meanwhile, Sarah provides Dana with her login information, allowing her to find the Project Zeus files. She finds a series of simulations ending with geostorms, and Max realizes someone used these simulations to make the storms happen for real. Later, Max has a video call with Jake to inform him that someone is using Dutch Boy to target specific cities, and Jake confirms they're doing it through the virus. He wants to temporarily deactivate Dutch Boy, so a reboot can eliminate the virus. Max authorizes it, but there's a slight problem. The only one who has the deactivation codes is the president, and Jake doesn't trust Palma. Only someone powerful can lock their accounts, and it's not a coincidence that in 3 weeks the US must hand over control of Dutch Boy to the International Council. Max asks Jake to keep an eye on the satellites while he finds a way to get the deactivation codes. A few hours later, President Palma is heading to Orlando for a national convention. Max approaches Sarah in secret and convinces her that the conspiracy is real, so she must help him steal the codes. To also board the plane, Max tells his bosses he's visiting his father who lives in Florida. At this point, Dutch Boy receives warning messages indicating that 200 satellites are malfunctioning, most of them nearing critical. The consequences are soon seen on Earth. A massive hailstorm begins to hit Tokyo, and extreme cold hits half of Rio de Janeiro. As Jack still can't deactivate the station, he decides to launch the reserve satellites to collide with those causing destruction around the world. They manage to do so and stop the one in Rio de Janeiro before the rest of the city is destroyed, but at that moment another alert comes in: a new geostorm is starting. On Earth, Max sees the disaster news and gets the alert on his tablet too, finding out that the storm is coming to Florida. Deckham approaches him to point out he knows Max's father is dead and demands to know the truth. Max tells him that the president is behind an imminent geostorm, but Deckham has bad news: they can't get the codes from Palma, because the president himself is the code. They need his fingerprints and his eyes to activate the shutdown, so they have no choice but to try to convince him. At this moment, the Dutch Boy team discovers that the station has initiated the self-destruction sequence on its own. They try to override the command but are locked out by the system, and Jake realizes that the only one with the knowledge to do this is Duncan. As the station begins to self-destruct one area at a time, Jake tells the team to evacuate before confronting Duncan. He finds him still at the computers and starts beating him, but Duncan has a hidden gun under his desk and uses it to get Jake off him. Then Duncan admits he put the virus in the system and that he accepted the corrupt government's payment because his software engineer's salary is ridiculous. He also confesses he wants to see the world burn. Jake moves quickly to disarm Duncan and beat him again, but Duncan recovers the gun and in the struggle, he accidentally shoots a window. Immediately, Jake runs to another room and locks the door while Duncan is ejected into space. Back in Florida, Deckham takes Max to a special room claiming they are going to talk to the president, but it's all a trap. It turns out that Deckham is the real villain and the president knows nothing, so he tries to shoot Max for knowing too much. Max manages to escape through a back door and finds Sarah, warning her that a storm will kill everyone here, which means Deckham will get rid of all the presidential candidates at once. He had given Max control of Dutch Boy and told him to hire Jake on purpose, thinking the constant fighting between the brothers would prevent them from seeing the truth. Their only solution is to kidnap the president, so Max goes to get a ready car while Sarah fires in the air, pretending to have seen someone in the audience about to shoot Palma. The emergency protocols are put into action while Sarah and another bodyguard escort the president, but as soon as they are alone in a corridor, Sarah knocks out the bodyguard and takes Palma with her to an autonomous car that Max has hijacked. While everyone at the station evacuates, the geostorm hits Earth. Tornadoes appear in Mumbai, a heatwave hits Moscow, and a mega tsunami hits Dubai. A lightning storm hits Florida, and Max and Sarah manage to get the president out before the stadium is destroyed. Deckham also escapes in time and sends his men after Palma, who is being informed of the whole truth by Max. Sarah has to drive like crazy to dodge the lightning, destroyed roads, and shots from Deckham's men. With not much time, Sarah decides to drive backward to shoot most of the men, then crashes her car into theirs. The car flips and explodes when struck by lightning. Nearby, Deckham hands a rocket launcher to his bodyguard to shoot at the car with the president. The rocket hits the target, and the car explodes, but suddenly Sarah appears behind Deckham and captures him. She used the autonomous driving system to make the car move and set a trap for Deckham. Now the police are coming to arrest him. Deckham tries to tell Palma he did this to get rid of their enemies and doesn't see it as genocide, because science is just playing God anyway, and he thinks Jake would agree, since he invented such a powerful machine in the first place. Hearing his brother insulted makes Max punch Deckham. The news begins to cover all the natural disasters and the lack of response from Dutch Boy, worrying Hannah. As the last space shuttle departs, Jake decides to stay at the station because the reboot has to be done manually. Fassbinder tries to stay too, but Jake sends her away. Meanwhile, Palma is taken to the Kennedy Space Center and immediately activates the deactivation codes. However, the self-destruction sequence cannot be reversed, so the brothers have to say goodbye in tears. They reconcile after all these years, and Max promises to take care of Hannah. As the station continues to self-destruct, Jake rushes to put on his astronaut suit and tries to reach the computer, but the door won't accept his code. Luckily, he is surprised to find out that Fassbinder stayed behind and knows another way out. Together, they reach the computer and perform the manual reboot. Fassbinder eliminates the virus while Jake deactivates the satellites, successfully stopping the geostorm. At that moment, the room explodes, and Jake and Fassbinder are left floating outside. Jake watches his creation dying and discovers there is one remaining satellite, so they let the wave from the explosion push them towards it. The duo manages to get into the satellite, but then the station finishes self-destructing, and NASA loses contact with them, so they can't control the satellite to bring it back. Suddenly, a light appears on the screen forming a distress signal pattern. They realize a satellite was pushed away by the explosion, then they find out the two are alive and well. One of the evacuation shuttles returns to pick them up, and a few hours later, everyone is safe back on Earth. Max reunites with Jake, and they hug for the first time in years. 6 months later, Jake, Max, and Hannah go fishing and find it boring, finally understanding why their dad never took them fishing before. Jake will return to space in a week to build a new station and wants one last happy moment with his family, but he promises he will be back.